Welcome, Wargamers, to the icy plains and mountains of the Gurish Heartlands, because today we are talking about Andtor, or Andtor. It's a little bit hard to pronounce for me. This is a region of Gur that was introduced to us in the latest General's Handbook, that's the 23 to 24 edition. And it seeks to create different environments, like think of biomes, right? Where there's frozen tundras, there's deserts, and we've explored a lot of different regions within Gur. Now we're moving into the icy peaks that specifically have a focus on magic. There's a lot to talk about because Gur is a very magical place. I know it's kind of odd to say because all the realms are, but in terms of physical manifestations of magic as sort of its own entity, Gur is a very wild place. And so today we're going to talk all about Andtor and examples of why this place is so cool and how it fits into the greater setting of Age of Sigmar. Before we jump into that though, I want to give a ad real quick up top. If you're interested in anything from AOS or really any miniatures game, please consider using my affiliate link below for Not Just Gaming. They're an awesome store here in the US with 15% or more off all GW stuff, and using that link goes a long way to supporting me, my wife, this channel, all of its life-changing stuff, and I really do appreciate it. Now, for those of you who are new to Gur, this is the realm of beasts, and it's also been kind of the main setting for the Age of Sigmar grand narrative since 3rd edition came out. And that was really introduced to us with the book Dominion by Darius Hanks, but to be truthful, we haven't really moved the plot forward. They kind of clicked it over to now being more focused on the realm of beasts and Dawnbringer Crusades, but in terms of world events happening, it just hasn't really moved forward at all. Now, I touched on something right there that really has to be centered on, and that is the idea of Dawnbringer Crusades. This is going to be a huge theme over the next coming weeks of lore as I cover a certain new army that's coming out here. But this story arc is really where the Dawnbringer Crusades are introduced, right? And these, if you don't know, are essentially part pioneer operation to go claim land, so kind of an expansionist style of convoy that's meant to go claim territory and fortify it. It's also part religious movement. The church is really whipping people up into a fervor to push them out the door. Sigmar is basically betting it all on his ability to expand, and that the forces of evil, whatever they are at that particular moment, chaos, destruction, death, can't endure all the major cities doing it at the same time. So this is like a massive pushing of the boundaries of the borders. In Dominion, we basically follow one of these Dawnbringer Crusades who they have a point in mind of where they're headed, and the whole thing is just this very harrowing saga about them getting there and trying to build it. And that sounds like a dangerous life on its own, right? Just leaving the safety of the cities and going out and settling new territory. It's big stuff. However, Gur itself makes that even more problematic because it is not a safe place. Now, I do have a dedicated video about Gur, the Realm of Beasts. I will link to it in the description down below. Go check that out if you wouldn't mind. I kind of go more into describing it as a realm from sort of like an esoteric standpoint, what it's supposed to represent, because I made that video back when the realms were a bit more abstract, but all the concepts have been reinforced and basically hold up. But in short, Gur is a place of predator and prey. Everything from insects, plants, trees, the rivers that cut through all of those things, mountains and monsters all have a kind of primal intelligence, and it's all hunting you all of the time. In that video I said when you step into Gur, you are basically entering yourself into a food chain, and no matter how arrogant these chaos lords who walk into the Gur thinking they're going to tame it, no matter how arrogant you are, you're never at the top of that chain. So of course on a small level it's monsters going mad and eating people maybe at their tents in the middle of the night or something like that. On the macro level we have continents that devour one another. Basically like our tectonic activity, what if every continent had a giant maw and just ate the other, and that's what made the other continental plate go down, like that kind of stuff. As mountains fall into the ocean, it's like the sea consuming it. And of course, yes, as I said before, it is filled to the brim with colossal monsters. And important to note is that if monsters exist in multiple realms, which many do, they are just inherently bigger, meaner, and stronger in Gur. But to the south, I believe, we are looking at a specific region called Andtor. And we usually see the realm of beasts as sort of a savanna, right? Like big, open, dry plains, lots of heat and sun. We've had references of the forests that exist within the Warcry setting right now. and the Gnarlwood and all the Beastgrave Mountain stuff from Underworld. So it's kind of getting a more diverse picture, but lightly speaking, it is a pretty dry place that looks like it's meant for African plains animals, hunters, predators, prey type thing. And a lot of Gur is that, but to the south, they have a lot of diversity. So this region we're talking about here is somewhat frozen. It borders a deeply frozen landmass called Bjarl. And as we said, it's very snowy in Andtor. If that is the snowy wastes, then Bjarl is the icy hell. And that's a theme that I cannot hit enough. The snow and the ice and the cold are all the major themes when we're talking about Andtor. No more savannas, people be freezing. And there's a few really interesting things when you talk about the winter setting in Gur and what that means. And quite frankly, it's also just a nice welcoming change of environment, because previously in our general handbooks, we have been fighting in those big open plains. I believe the last one was going underground. I honestly didn't get a chance to play the last GHB that much. But I like just the scenic and kind of mental imagery change of, okay, now we're in icy mountains. I dig it. Now let's talk about Andtor from a perspective of what makes it dangerous in particular, like its unique environmental hazards, as well as why would people want to go there? What's the draw for all of these armies to descend upon Andtor? Well, we'll kick it off by what makes it dangerous. It seems as if the Everwinter is somehow stuck here. And then I can't quite get if that was like a literal, the Everwinter is stuck here, or if it means it's akin to that kind of storm. Either way, if you don't know, the Everwinter is a supernatural storm that follows some of the Ogre Maw tribes, specifically called the Beastclaw Raiders. There's this all kinds of lineage. It's a very vague backstory, but it seems to be Gorkamorka cursed some ogre for actions taken during an event in the Age of Myth with this giant ice storm. So if they ever stop moving, they are consumed by the storm and frozen solid. This means you can actually watch the migration patterns of these Maw tribes, because you'll see just a giant line of ice storm across like a huge reft of ground because the storm is following them. So you roll up to Akshi where everything is like fire and brimstone, and you bring an ice storm into that, it's crazy. Now it is totally possible that it's discussed in at least the earlier Beastclaw Raider lore books that if the tribe were to stop long enough, the storm would just bury them and they'd get frozen in place. I don't know how you would ever like work your way out of that, but somehow they do. My point is, it could be a situation where the tribe just got stuck in Andtor and then the storm just pinned them in place. Regardless, it must have been a while ago, because the world has had time to adjust to this new icy environment. For example, the monsters here are above and beyond some of the most dangerous things in Gur even, because they had to develop larger, thicker hides to be able to survive all the different things. Not to mention the cold. But we're also talking about those crazy things that happen in Gur. For example, a cave can be described as like a maw and the icicles are its teeth, or the icicles come off and are alive and try to stab you. Not to mention that it's full of all kinds of creatures, from frost sabers, yetis, mournfangs, snow boars. This is the home of course, the Beastclaw Raiders, as we said, like in terms of their preferred environment. It's home for them. Also, the Icebone war clan of Bone Splitters enjoy the cold and tundras. And that's just the stuff that's going to kill you that you can see looking around. Because beneath you, all of these, like, basically the ice shelves that you're walking on begin to rumble because they're all fighting against one another. Sometimes if you're walking past like a waterfall or something, it's frozen over, it's, nothing's going to happen. It will all of a sudden burst to life and rush just to kind of swallow up people who are walking by. There's even a story at one point where some expeditions kept coming across like parties of people that were dead, frozen in place, and there's like huge holes in the ground next to them. So it's like, oh my gosh, is this a night goblin thing? Like, what is burrowing up to attack our people? And everyone's just kind of frozen to death around them. And it took way too long for people to figure out that there are these massive worms, essentially, that just bore through the earth. And wherever it pops up, that area happens to be steeped in all kinds of ice magic, and they just all got insta-killed for doing nothing but being where this worm happens to surface. And this is what I mean, like, all of this is absolutely insane. I just really want a compendium of like short stories that are like camping tales, like the kind of stories, I don't know, like a framing device of we're all sitting at a cabin in an Age of Sigmar setting in Gur, trying to stay warm in Andtor, and it's like, what is the camp master? What story does he tell? I want to know that, because I want to know what's scarier. And so those are the dangers, and that's going to be danger that affects every single faction that rolls in there, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Chaos Army, you're going to try to subdue it all, but Gur fights back with all the things we talked about. Even if you're a destruction army, the Orc war clans have to work hard to utilize their environment to their advantage and not just kind of fall victim to it. And so ultimately the question becomes, why would I do this? Like, at what point does the reward become worth the risk? Well, let's go over the things we know about Andtor in terms of enticing people down to it. First up, it's very clear that there's something very magical about this place. They cite the evidence of the Everwinter being here, that there's something that's tethering a great power to this place, and it's manifesting as ice magic. There are many reports of Gurish Realmstone, which I believe is also called Amberstone, and that's been a huge arc ever since the Heart of Gur box came out. That's the one that was after Dominion, and they introduced the Incarnates, those big monsters where it's a big hunk of Realmstone and a swirling beast around it. So that creature has a reason to exist here, although it could be really cool to repaint that model in a way that makes it like an ice beast swirl. But also, Sigmar needs stuff for his conquest, and we kind of talked about this in a previous video, that the raw materials of war, especially war on the scale that Sigmar wants to do, requires an immense amount of stuff. So all of these parties, yeah, they might be expanding for the sake of pushing the borders forward, but also they're there to get meat, to hunt, to get furs. These are the main exports of Gur, because other realms are much less inhabitable in terms of like having creatures to eat and, you know, ground that you can farm. Realms that do offer that are in huge supply, and so these are also hunting parties. And as we mentioned, like the Everwinter as being a source of magic, there's a whole bunch of magic wizards and scholars and all kinds of stuff flocking to the area, because normally you can't research the Everwinter if that's what you're trying to understand, because it moves, right? It's moving with the Maw tribe. Of course, you don't want to be near the Maw tribe, but what if there was a place where it was pinned in spot, and so then you can go and research it. And so that's how I get a lot of the magic themed things here, and in fact, it's why wizards are such a big focus in this GHB, is that it's basically calling all the people who are smart enough, if you can figure this out, there are riches here for you. And so like I end all my videos, let's talk about why is this cool? Well, to me, Andtor represents a nice palette change. I like the idea of moving from the, you know, desert savannas, because even the underground stuff, it was still that same kind of dry rock. Now we're in sort of a ice cold, there could be lots of water at the bottom of these hills, that kind of stuff. It's just a nice change of ecosystem. I deeply want the Icebones War Clan to make an appearance. Those are my Bone Splitter boys, but with ice weapons, because, as I said before, they live in this exact kind of environment, because the boars can sustain themselves, and they see the icy rocks as sort of like the teeth of Gorka Morka himself. But backing up and kind of putting the setting as it's described in the context of what we know about Age of Sigmar, this is really cool because I have to imagine what the Dawnbringer Crusades are actually like. From everything else we've read about them from Dominion and that kind of stuff, you get the idea that they are really designed to go to a place and establish a beachhead and then fortify it over time, provided that the rewards keep being worth the risk. So it starts off with basically a caravan, surrounded wagons, and then they'll build a wall, and then sort of like a magic shield that stops ghosts, and then keep reinforcing from there as the population grows. But what does that look like in Gur? Because, the reason I bring this up, consistently lore-wise throughout the history of Age of Sigmar, when they talk about Gur, a reoccurring theme that they hit is that you can't build anything substantial because the ground moves. Because you might build a city and then the different walls and stuff will just drift apart as the continent itself tries to shake you off like fleas. Remember, everything's alive, and so the places that are stable enough really stand out. Excelsis is one of them. It's the big mega city of Gur where the Knights Excelsis are. It's featured a lot in the story arc in Gur so far as a good hub, but it stands out because it's not doing that. It's slowly falling into the ocean, but that's not going to be for a while, so we're not worried about that. But everywhere else, most of the fortifications and stuff are built to be, first of all, easily to dismantle. So you're talking about like just transporting all of your tents, your huts, whatever that looks like. Your places are not going to be there for very long. What if the points of geomantic power that they're looking for move? It just, when you think about how crazy this environment would be in the context of what the cities of Sigmar or Dawnbringer Crusades have to do in order to thrive and grow and expand, it kind of makes it seem much more daunting. But anyway, friends, I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Andtor? And not just as a lore sense, but like, what do you think of this current GHB? I would love to know your thoughts. I'm now moved into a new place. and settling in, and I hope to get a lot more Age of Sigmar games in as I'm now plugged into a local group. I hope to cover it more, and I'm so excited to get back into this hobby. I missed you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll talk to you soon. Happy wargaming.